The Winnipeg Jets are one of the hottest teams in the NHL as of late. And surprising a lot of people, Harrison Lee of Locked On Winnipeg Jets joins us to discuss how they're getting this done and whether or not they can sustain it. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, Harrison Lee. And Harrison, some good times lately in Winnipeg. 8 of the last 9 coming into the Sunday game, 5 in a row. What has this team been doing so much better that they're quietly sort of putting together this impressive run?
I think ever since the Dubois trade, the new additions up front and, the team having like legit forward depth for once has really made a huge difference. The Jets have a nice bottom 6 and the top 6, it's a little bit uneven at times. Like the top line, without Velarde for the past few weeks hasn't been nearly as ideal, but like the combination of Perfetti, Ehlers, and Nemesnikov has been doing well. The third and fourth lines have at different times really controlled play. So the Jets finally looking up, and the defense has managed to stabilize just enough. And of course, Hellebuck finally putting together a string of pretty good games as of late.
Got to ask you about Kyle Connor, 14 goals in his first 19 games this season. What stands out to you about his play so far this year?
Honestly, I think it's just Kyle Connor doing what he does best. A lot of times when he's not scoring, I think it tends to drive people crazy watching him because he does some interesting things off the puck. But when he is scoring, or actually sometimes even when he does have the puck, but of course when he is scoring, we're all, entranced by his ability to be a super lethal threat. He's had some games recently where he just really went off. I mean, he always has that one-on-one matchup ability and stuff that's really impressive, but I feel like every once in a while he still does something that just makes you just kind of drop your jaw a little bit.
This team right now, top 10 in both goals scored and goals allowed in the NHL. In the past, defense, everyone knew Hellebuck, one of the better goalies in the league. Yet, the scoring depth, as you mentioned, picking up. Who are some of the players who have helped them be more consistent offensively?
So I think guys this year like Niederreiter and Lowry, Perfetti, Ehlers, those guys have really stepped up. Ehlers has really rounded into form lately. Perfetti has been a huge, huge help. And what's kind of nice is like on each line, for the most part, you have some guys who are able to carry the load. Even on the fourth line, you've got Gustafsson and Barron who have done a pretty reasonable job. And like you're not expecting every line to score, 20 goals. But I think what is really nice is that the third line is a matchup nightmare. Appleton is kind of clicking with Lowry and Niederreiter. Nino's emergence has really been, or really his acquisition has been a huge windfall for the Jets. I can't believe the Preds gave him away basically for like a second. That trade is looking super lopsided, which is kind of funny because like the Preds are now after Connor Garland, or were at least recently. And I'm like, didn't you just kind of give away Connor Garland for a second to the Jets? But he's been great. Perfetti has really been, now that he's healthy, putting on an immense season. And, for me, I've always felt he was a superstar in the making. And he's just really now starting to live up to that potential.
One area of concern may be special teams. Power play 21st in the league heading into Sunday's games. The penalty kill 26th. how big of a concern are special teams, and what can the Jets do to improve those numbers?
I think, it is one of the sore spots for the Jets. The power play has been a little bit better over the past few weeks. Still not great, but better. What I'll say is the PK, it's going to come down to Hellebuck. I really feel like the PK structure changed this year. Last year, they pressured a lot. They created some, odd man rushes on PKs. They hassled and harassed puck carriers. And this year, it's like they just did a complete 180 and went back to pre Scott O'Neill and pre bonus Jets PK structure, which is sit there and pray, which is not really how you're supposed to kill penalties. So in terms of how to fix that, I feel like tactically just go back to what you did last year. I really don't know why they stopped being aggressive on the PK. For the power play, I think some roster reinforcements would help. Velarde coming back, both for even strength and on the power play, is a big add. And if the Jets are really serious about competing this year, which I think this is probably one of their best chances, you got to swing big and go for a big player who's maybe a little more than just a rental. Maybe, on Twitter, I always see people talking about Buchnevich as a really big name. There's like some fish like that would probably be worth chasing that could really help up front.
Do you think management is willing to go that route?
Don't know, to be honest. I don't have a read on what they're thinking. I feel like this is the season to do it, but maybe they disagree. I know that they like to do a lot of mid-tier moves. Maybe they think there's like another Niederreiter hiding out there. My feeling, though, is that if you really want to push it and go for it, you've got to chase a really expensive player who can kind of push you over that curve and add just that extra little bit of overkill.
One possible concern, Connor Hellebuck now has started 15 of the first 20 games, including tonight where he's not playing. Are you concerned about him possibly burning out as the season progresses if he's going to play 3/4 of the games?
I don't know. In previous years, maybe. I feel like he's kind of used to it now. The only thing I do wonder is his long-term health. I don't know how that's going to be. The sort of style of play that he has, I don't know that it's necessarily as tough on his joints as some of the guys who are really fast and reflex-oriented, but he is a big goalie. He's got a big frame, so I do kind of wonder if the pressure of playing like 50-plus does wear on towards the end. I don't think it'll burn him out necessarily, but I wouldn't mind if the Jets have a little bit more rest. But unfortunately, as we're seeing right now with the Jets against the Preds, Brossoit is just incapable of doing some of the basic stuff for saves. So they may not trust him enough to actually allow him to be back up. So we'll see how that goes.
So what are the keys to the Jets? I mean, you're not going to win 8 out of 9 for the rest of the season, but what are the keys for them to sustain a strong level of play and be contenders the rest of the year?
Stay healthy. That's a big one. I think number 2, you want to add 1 or 2 pieces. The blue line really needs more mobility. As it is, it's like an okay defensive unit, but I think in terms of offensive creation and puck moving ability, adding Ville Heinola off of the injured list would be great. But quite honestly, the Jets just need another top 4 puck mover in general. I think that would be a huge boost. I don't know who's going to be available and who's going to be within the price range, but maybe the Jets go back to the Flyers and try for a Sanheim or something.
Okay, and anything else? Any other keys to long-term success?
I think for this season, just kind of keep following the process. I mean, everyone's been sort of bought in. I think the process has looked good. The Jets are really great at 5v5. The special teams definitely need work, but it's not as much of a concern right now, at least. But if they do kind of start to falter and the scoring dries up, obviously they're going to want to be sharper on the PK and take advantage of those power play opportunities. But I think just following the current trajectory, I mean, as long as they don't kind of go back to some of their old habits, this team should be in good straits for the rest of the season.
Well, it's going to be an exciting ride. Harrison, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
We are LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter/X. And of course, you can find Locked On Winnipeg Jets on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube.
All right, Harrison, always a pleasure. Thanks for stopping by today.
Thanks for having me.
Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. A big new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. A player on your favorite team could score 50 goals. Your team could hoist the Stanley Cup, and you can win big playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid, Ovechkin, McKinnon, Crosby, or Sorokin will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, NHL fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.